what I'm going to try and do for you this evening is tell you the importance of modern day explorers, because we are living in a very different era. And sometimes when I stand up on stage and say I'm an explorer, then people instantly think about ego and pushing yourself out there and being that person. Well, I'm the very opposite to that. I think in the beginning, though, after leaving the military and then going into rescue services, I did step into exploration because I did want to test myself physically and mentally. It was slightly about ego, just seeing what I'm all about, really. But after a while, it became less about me and more about the environment that I was working with. And also, I've got a love of talking in schools, so I wanted to engage students around the world into my projects. And really what inspired me on ice or on mountains, I wanted to sort of showcase that for young people so they could understand themselves and more about the planet itself. From the military, I think I learned discipline, which is a really good thing to have, self-discipline, and also being able to think methodically about things. And then from the rescue services, I learned how to deal with very stressful situations, but without emotion. So you've got multi-car pile-ups or devastation going on, but you're an effective team, the right equipment, the right preparation, the right approach, but there's no emotion taking over you. So both of those skills I took into now leading expeditions around the world. I work in a freezer basically. The temperatures average around about -30, -35. And in this situation, we rescued a team in 2004 whilst we were training them in high Arctic Canada. And the biggest killer actually isn't polar bears or open water or strong winds, it's sweat. So when you're moving along, you're in this heat of your body generating heat on you, which is great. It's a lovely place to be, cocooned in this heat. And then when you stop to take a drink after an hour, all that sweat will turn to ice and can cool down your heart, your lungs, you can get hypothermia from it. So the survival skill, because you'll need it probably in the cold, is to actually monitor the way that you move and you don't sweat as much. Because when you sweat, it turns to ice, and you can see here, you can see my eyes froze over a little bit. That one completely froze, and that was partially frozen. That's my best look, actually. That's full of photograph thing. This gives you a little idea of who I am.
You talk about grueling expeditions. Every expedition has its dangers and life-threatening events. If you're not properly prepared, or if you don't have the right equipment, then you are in danger straight away. Experience is everything. So I've done over 14 major expeditions in the Arctic. I've worked alone, I've worked with teams. My ground logistics is very good as well. In 2003, I realised how much exploration meant to me. And that was my first expedition. And over 70 days, I learned how to live, move, and survive in temperatures down to about -35. And I was in fear of my life out there, but after those 70 days, I appreciated where I was. From day one, you're actually losing weight. You're performing like athletes really. I was 16.5 stone for my 7th pole solo expedition, and over 50 days, I lost just under 4 stone. When I'm at home, I pull tires, and what I'm doing is simulating how my muscles will work, pulling 120, 160 kilos of a sledge on ice. But for me, exploration is completely about education. But on a selfish level, I'm in it to explore. And it's like that childlike instinct you have, what's around the next corner, the butterflies that you have in your stomach, the excitement that you have about seeing something new. It strips away everything that I see and feel in life. And that's when your body feels alive and the senses come alive. And you have time to think and time to be creative in your own brain and be that singular human being, if you like.
The big change for me as a brand, I didn't realise it was a brand until I did 14 major expeditions, as I said, and I I wanted to up the game a little bit. You get to a point in your life when you want to push this passion forward. And I decided to do something that nobody else had ever done, which was to walk solo and supported to the South Pole, and then follow that by a direct journey solo and supported to the North Pole. And this was for Skype in the classroom, so I've already engaged with 10,000 students around the world to follow this journey itself. After 3 years, this was what I was left with when the plane dropped me off on the Antarctic continent. So nothing going on for 50 days around here, but a hell of a lot going on inside that head. 2 days into the expedition, I lost my iPod. So I lost all of my music and anything to stimulate my brain, so I had nothing to focus on for those 48 remaining days. And the sense of failure was always there. The biggest fear I had was finding a reason to actually give in. And I was struggling for it all the time. But what kept me going was not just the thought that I didn't have another choice, but also I created dreamscapes in my brain to step me out of the situation. Like people who are locked in prison or held captive or whatever, you can create a lot in your brain, and that's what I did. I guided teams, I gave talks, and I did various other things inside my brain which kept me going for the whole of that time. And I reached the South Pole. This is the quick version. We don't have much time. There's a lot more to tell. But I reached the South Pole, but my mind was very much fixed on the North Pole. I've got to take you to Everest yet, so we've got to be quick. The North Pole, very, very different because the ocean is moving below me. So you're creating this beautiful sort of sculptured landscape. And also you've got the problem of polar bears. I've seen polar bears close up. As close as that. So that's the polar bear's nose. And he was that big. No, he wasn't that big. So that's the polar bear's nose. And I was stood on some ice, probably up to about here, with my ski stick down. I was using one of these GoPros to point it. Am I as scary as a polar bear? Probably not much. But he was just inquisitive, and you think, well, how did I survive that? Well, these bears and the animals that we see in the very extremes of the planet, they don't know what humans are capable of. So they don't know that, we could hunt them or kill them or whatever. So they're just inquisitive, and they see these new colours of reds and greens, and they look at you, and then they sniff the air. They can smell up to 20 miles away on flat ice. They can run just as fast as a horse, and they can swim great distances as well. So they're great predators. So I had the advantage of him actually knowing that didn't know what I was. So I took photographs, and eventually I scared him away with some flares that I threw in front of him, and he ran off. I reached the North Pole, and I felt quite honoured to be there, to tell you the truth. A lot of people have done, well, not many, but a few people have done the North and South Poles. Are usually Swedish or Norwegian or Special Forces. Nobody from Coventry had actually ever attempted it. I was quite proud of that. That was the season we went down as well, so I was a bit disappointed. So I became, it really advanced my career, but what I was really interested in, because students were really getting involved in this, and this is a time when social media is just kicking in. So a lot of people were following my journeys online. So I set up My Life in a Freezer, which is a project I did for the Midlands mainly. 60 schools were invited to follow me. Then I started to give talks in universities, all different age groups, and I became a Scout ambassador as well. There's 10 of us in the country, and basically we do everything that Bear Grylls doesn't want to do. But it's another engagement. So from the very first expedition, I linked to only 18 people in my local school. I crossed an area of the Northwest Passage from Resolute Bay to Grise Fjord. If you don't know it, it's high up in the Arctic, and it's 300 miles of distance between it. Those 18 young people had a sat phone call from me every other day. Now we increased that number to last year's expedition on Mount Everest, to 1.2 million students. So this is the encouragement I give to these young people to follow me. I also set up projects, the Global Schools Programme, the Arctic Schools, My Life in a Freezer, and Expedition 8848. These are the outreach programs that I set up. I don't have a big team, it's just me, but I use my skills to speak to organisations, to draw them into what I do, and that's what I'm most proud of. This is, if you were asked me to put one picture up, it would be this one. On the other end of the computer here is a school in Japan during the time of the tsunami. So the teachers said, look, will you link with this school? But there's been 160 dead bodies held within the school itself. And they need you to talk to them. Well, I couldn't speak to them because military rescue and exploration isn't dangerous. Because you train, you have the right equipment, and you're with the right people. Tsunamis, terrorist attacks happen, and they stay with people. But these young people are at 3,500 meters up in the Himalayas, and they've been through earthquakes. So that's what I did. I connected the two schools together from Japan to Nepal. And that's me as an explorer. We've then extended it onto mountains. We use a thing called a BGAN unit, which means that we can create a Wi-Fi space to hold the classroom with a backdrop of a mountain instead of the classroom itself. We did an expedition in 2013, and the expedition was to summit Mount Everest. We headed through the death zone on Mount Everest, where your oxygen levels are at 30%, and your movements and thoughts are very much slowed. And that's where I held the classroom environment in these conditions, linking to, at the time, 200 young people in Australia who were sat like you are, but on the screen it was myself in the death zone speaking to these young people, holding the classroom for 10 minutes. Everest. On the 19th of May in 2013, we were 200 meters from the summit of Mount Everest. I had a unit in my backpack to do the first live Skype call from the summit to students around the world, plus the bosses of Microsoft and Skype. No pressure. As I started to climb at -40 with a 50-mile-an-hour side wind, the lead guy, there's 4 of us in the team, dropped to his knees and fell against the mountain. So I went up to him as the next man and pulled him towards me, looked in his eyes, and he was dying. So I went back to Peter, who's the doctor, and I said, seeing he's dying, and Peter said, my feet are frozen, I need to head down the mountain. And then I looked back to the 4th member, and he was already abseiling into the darkness. So I needed to make a decision at that point, because I could see the head torches of the climbers reaching the summit. That decision was made very easily because it was based on me as a human being rather than a so-called explorer who wants to wave a flag at the top of a mountain. So what we did, we carried him down to 8,000, we kept him alive, and over 3 days we started to descend him back to base camp itself. And then we walked him back to his village, and this is the side you don't see. His family, his children, his friends. Everybody on that expedition survived. And the 10,000 students who were following it learned more of a lesson about that moment than they would have done about waving a flag. So what's next? I've only got a minute to tell you. Oh, I won't tell you. The Arctic Ocean is a vast area. And people think that when the ice melts, then actually this question came from the young boy. He held a glass up with an ice in it and says, when that ice melts, it kind of stays the same level. So how come the Arctic Ocean and the sea levels will rise? Well, that's a good question. I'll Google it. I work with scientists, I went a bit further. Basically, it's got its own gravitational pull because of the vastness of the ice. And it draws in the ocean from around the planet. And because the ice is depleting, is pushing the ocean back around the planet itself. So the next expedition that I'm doing started in 2016. I worked with Special Forces teams heading towards the North Pole, and we started to film a great film about modern day exploration. Solo 100 has been backed by great production companies around the world who believe in the messages that we are putting out. Companies like this want to put out great content, which is in the now. Worked in Africa with teams who, anti-poaching teams, showing the culture of the area and talking in schools. Also worked in Alaska with dog teams, and again looking at the culture and looking at how the schools operate within the cold, the heat, the height of mountains, and also in the cities in New York, etc. So we're collectively trying to get this idea of modern day exploration, working on Everest last year with Special Forces teams, again filming the whole journey. This next journey, the journey in 2016 was with Lonely Planet Skype, and we did lesson plans and great sort of projects with them. We can't miss that picture. And Buzz Aldrin made me an ambassador of his education program, which reaches millions of students worldwide. The importance of that for me is the outreach. So I've got 56 million students from the Scouts, millions of students with Buzz's foundation, and now we just need to get the messages clear and precise. It's an official attempt. It's a 100-day solo expedition right across the Arctic, but it's more about reaching out to young people around the world. This is what the expedition is about.
This is the Earth, our home. She is 4.5 billion years old, and in less than 200 years, we have flattened more rainforests, made more species extinct, and fractured the stability of this planet beyond any other civilization. In 2016, 3 explorers helicoptered over the vast Arctic Ocean. Their mission, to film the journey to the North Pole and to capture the state of the Arctic ice.
This is Mark Wood here. We're about 16 nautical miles outside of the Geographic North Pole. We're at ground zero for climate change. What we're going to find out is how much time do we really have?
It feels so unstable.
Look at that, it's moving now.
That whole thing's shifting. We seem to be hitting loads of ice rubble.
20 miles short of the pole, there was actual water there.
You know, this just doesn't feel right. The ice is breaking up. In places it really shouldn't be.
And that's when we realised it's melting so much faster than we thought.
This devastation that we have documented and seen, I'm telling you, it's there.
The pilots were turning around and saying, we don't want to land here.
We can't just dust it under the carpet. Something does need to be done.
Whoa.
We're really in a race against time here.